Is the honey badger supposed to be in the aviary? Dr. Mason Reed's question hung in the sterile air of the observation platform, accompanied by a low groan from Taylor Hale, the zoo's headkeeper. Below them, the gleaming alien-designed Interstellar Zoo stretched out like a mosaic of meticulously engineered habitats, each supposed to be a flawless recreation of Earth's ecosystems. Except now, it wasn't. In the supposed serenity of the aviary, the honey badger, an animal Hale had insisted on including as a cultural ambassador, was in full reign of terror. It darted between alien staff, snarling at anything that moved, and had cornered a terrified flock of avian species that definitely weren't from Earth. "First of all," Hale said, adjusting the strap of her oxygen regulator, "this is educational." Educational? Mason's eyes flicked to a massive hollow screen nearby, where the words, "Interstellar Harmony, Earth's Rich Biodiversity, Perfectly Preserved," scrolled in glowing alien script. Below that, the honey badger launched itself at a decorative hover feather structure, sending alien caretakers scattering like leaves. "This is a disaster," snapped Ylrix Vor, the alien head curator, their translucent head frills quivering. Their multi-jointed arms flailed as they gestured toward the chaos. "Your creatures are defying the protocols. Why is it not in its designated habitat? Why does it behave as though it hates harmony?" "Harmony?" Hale barked a laugh. "That's a honey badger. Harmony isn't in its vocabulary." The Interstellar Zoo, perched on an uninhabited moon with pristine ecosystems, was a Galactic Federation initiative meant to showcase Earth's wildlife to alien dignitaries from across the stars. According to the Federation, it was a masterpiece of cooperative preservation, engineered to reflect humanity's ecosystems. But Mason had taken one look at the schematics weeks ago and thought, this is going to be a mess. Aliens, he'd realized, loved efficiency. They loved harmony. Earth, on the other hand, was the embodiment of chaos wrapped in a thin veneer of order. Sure, they'd gotten some things right. The zoo's habitats, with their holographic skies and biosynthetic climates, looked perfect, until you added actual Earth animals, and therein lay the problem. "Why are there zebras with the lions?" Mason asked, staring at a glowing habitat schematic on the command console. Ylrix didn't even look up. "Because they are compatible." "They're dinner," Mason said flatly. "They are harmonious prey and predator pairs," Ylrix insisted. Hale snorted, leaning against the console. "Did you ever think Earth creatures coexist because fences exist?" "Primitive methods," Ylrix said dismissively. Now, with opening day hours away, Mason found himself standing in the middle of what could only be described as a crisis disguised as an exhibit. The honey badger's rampage, while chaotic, wasn't the zoo's only problem. Somehow, the parrots had escaped their aviary. Designed to mimic Earth's tropical rainforests, the aviary dome had been a glowing jewel of the exhibit. Now, it was a cacophony of squawking voices as parrots mimicked alien alarms. "It's learning Zarnakian phrases," Hale said, impressed, as a parrot swooped by, screeching, "Activate evacuation protocol." "That's not funny," Ylrix exclaimed, clutching their sensory frills as the alarm-sounding parrots sent alien staff scrambling to non-existent safety drills. Hale grinned. "It's a little funny." Meanwhile, the predator enclosure was on the verge of collapse. Lions prowled uneasily near holographic savanna projections that occasionally glitched, flickering between day and night. The alpha lion growled, eyeing a holographic zebra that had inexplicably materialized between them. "That's not even a real zebra," Mason muttered. "And yet," Hale said, pointing to the lion, "it knows it's delicious." Ylrix turned to Mason, their frills glowing faintly with stress. "This was supposed to be a showcase of Earth's harmony. Why is it chaos?" "Because Earth is chaos," Mason replied. "You want balance? You should have picked species that don't fight for survival every second of their lives." Ylrix bristled. "On my homeworld, our apex species coexist." "That's because your apex species eat light and photosynthesize," Hale said, shrugging. "Our apex species eat each other." The situation only worsened as alien visitors began arriving. Galactic dignitaries had been promised serene Earth wildlife, a chance to observe humanity's biological diversity. Instead, they were met with a holographic display reading, "Please excuse minor technical adjustments," as chaos unfolded behind them. The alien dignitaries' reactions ranged from awe to horror. One crystalline ambassador, watching the honey badger flip an alien caretaker into a shallow pond, whispered, "This creature, is it your apex predator?" Mason paused. "Not technically, but it's pretty close." Just as Mason thought things couldn't get worse, a loud crash echoed from the predator enclosure. He turned to see a tiger, majestic, sleek, and clearly annoyed, stalking toward the aviary gates. The containment field flickered ominously. "Oh, come on," Mason muttered. Yilrix's frills flared. "Why is the tiger not contained?" "Because you built a containment system with a reset cycle," Mason snapped, already moving toward the emergency controls. Which, for the record, doesn't mean anything to a tiger. Hale, close behind him, added, "Told you Earth creatures don't care about your holographic lasers." As Mason reached the controls, alarms blared, and the holo display flashed ominously. "Containment breach imminent." "Containment breach imminent." "That's not ominous at all," Mason muttered as he dashed into the control room. The holographic display showed a glowing red outline of the predator enclosure, with several warning icons blinking at alarming speeds. Behind him, Hale jogged in, slightly out of breath but grinning. "On the bright side, it's a real showcase of Earth's apex predators now." Mason shot her a look. "Not helping." Yilrix Vor burst into the room moments later, their translucent frills glowing an angry shade of orange. "Why is this happening? Your creatures are acting irrationally." "Welcome to Earth's biodiversity," Mason replied, typing furiously on the console. "If it's alive, it's either hungry, territorial, or just in a bad mood." Yilrix looked like they were on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "On Zerthol, our creatures are harmonious." "Do your creatures have teeth?" Hale asked, smirking as she leaned against the console. Out on the observation deck, chaos was in full swing. The tiger, majestic and utterly unbothered by the alarms, padded gracefully through what was supposed to be a predator-only section. It passed by holographic zebras that flickered in and out of existence, its amber eyes scanning the unfamiliar environment. Unfortunately, its path took it directly toward the aviary dome. "Tell me the aviary isn't on the same grid as the predator section," Mason said, his fingers hovering over the control panel. Yilrix hesitated, which was answer enough. "For the love of course it is," Mason groaned. Inside the aviary dome, things were somehow worse. The parrots had taken full advantage of the containment field glitch to explore new heights of chaos. One parrot had commandeered an alien caretaker's communication device and was gleefully squawking garbled galactic common into it. Another had learned to mimic the tiger's growl, sending the smaller alien staff scurrying for cover. "Why is your species so determined to spread chaos?" Yilrix demanded, their frills pulsing with stress. "Because chaos works," Hale replied cheerfully, watching a parrot swoop past, trailing what looked suspiciously like an alien's identification badge. Somehow, amidst all this, the honey badger had found its way into the aviary. It darted between the foliage, ignoring the chirping alien birds entirely, and instead began tearing into one of the habitat's decorative hover feather nests. "What is that creature doing now?" Yilrix asked, horrified. "Rearranging the furniture," Hale said with a shrug. "It's dismantling a structural element." "Like I said, rearranging." Mason worked furiously at the console, trying to reroute power to the containment fields. "Okay, here's the plan. Isolate the predator section, lock down the aviary, and hope the honey badger doesn't figure out how to turn off gravity while we're at it." "Why do you speak of these creatures as though they are capable of advanced sabotage?" Yilrix asked, genuinely alarmed. Mason paused, glancing at Hale. "They're not, are they?" Mason sighed. "Honestly, I wouldn't put it past them." Meanwhile, the galactic dignitaries had gathered on the observation deck, drawn by the rising alarm tones and flickering displays. Their reactions were a mix of fascination and outright terror. "Is this part of the exhibit?" one crystalline ambassador asked, gesturing to the holographic warning that now read, "Containment failure." Hale turned to Mason. "We should start selling tickets to this disaster." Mason didn't look up. "Only if we survive it." The crisis reached its peak as the tiger, now fully loose, padded toward the aviary's entrance. A flickering containment field tried to activate, but collapsed almost immediately. The parrot, still perched on the alien communicator, chose this moment to mimic the sound of a distant predator, which seemed to catch the tiger's attention. "Oh, that's just perfect," Mason said, watching the scene unfold. Hale, however, grinned. "This is where it gets fun." "What's fun about this?" She gestured toward the honey badger, now charging directly at the tiger. For a tense moment, the tiger froze, staring down the honey badger. The badger, in true Earth fashion, showed no signs of intimidation. Instead, it let out a guttural snarl and lunged forward. The tiger, clearly not in the mood for a fight, turned and slinked away, retreating toward a quieter corner of the enclosure. "Did the badger just—" Yilrix trailed off, their frills quivering. "Yeah," Hale said, grinning. "It just won." Mason Reed stood at the observation deck, staring at the scene unfolding below with a mix of exasperation and grim amusement. The honey badger had successfully chased off the tiger, and now it was industriously dismantling a decorative hoverfeather structure, while the parrots cheered it on from above. "This isn't just chaos anymore," Mason muttered. "This is performance art." Behind him, Yilrix Vor paced, their translucent head frills glowing a faint, stressed blue. "This was supposed to be a showcase of harmony," they hissed. "Why are your creatures so ungovernable?" "Because that's nature," Mason said, tapping a holographic display on the console. "It's unpredictable, chaotic, and, on Earth, probably trying to kill you." "It is barbaric," Yilrix said, aghast. "It's effective," Mason shot back, scanning the damage reports. "You wanted apex predators. This is what you get." Taylor Hale strode in, brushing dust off her jumpsuit and grinning like she'd just won a prize. "Good news," she announced. "The honey badger scared off the tiger. Bad news? It's still loose." "Fantastic," Mason muttered. "The aviary's worse," Hale continued. "The parrots have learned how to trigger holographic displays. One of them made an announcement about mandatory evacuations, and now the alien staff are hiding under the desks." Yilrix froze mid-pace. "They cannot trigger displays. They lack the cognitive ability." "They lack the cognitive ability to care what you think," Hale replied. "Face it, Vor. Earth creatures play by their own rules." Mason leaned over the console, adjusting the display. "Speaking of rules, we need to re-establish containment before this whole place turns into a reality show." The first order of business was stabilizing the predator enclosure. The habitat generators, designed to project holographic savannas, had malfunctioned entirely, leaving the space flickering between night, day, and occasional bursts of static. "This is why you don't let engineers design ecosystems," Mason muttered as he crouched beside the containment grid, tools in hand. Yilrix hovered nearby, their frills fluttering nervously. "Our engineers are the most advanced in the galaxy." "Sure," Mason said, prying open a panel. "But have they ever built something that could survive Earth?" The panel sparked, and Yilrix flinched. Mason smirked. "Didn't think so." While Mason worked on the enclosure, Hale wrangled the honey badger back into its containment field. It wasn't easy. The badger seemed to view every attempt to corral it as a personal challenge. "You realize it's not afraid of anything, right?" Hale said, gesturing to the badger as it snarled at a piece of containment field that dared spark near its den. "Maybe we should have just let it run the exhibit," Mason replied. Meanwhile, Yilrix coordinated alien technicians to assist with the repairs. The aliens, though skeptical of human methods, began to grudgingly acknowledge Mason's practical expertise. "I must admit," Yilrix said, watching Mason splice wires with a steady hand, "your improvisation is effective." "Thanks," Mason said, grinning. "Now pass me that plasma torch." With the predator enclosure back online, the team turned their attention to the aviary. The parrots had moved on from mimicking alarms to imitating alien dignitaries, complete with haughty tones and exaggerated gestures. One crystalline ambassador turned to Mason, looking thoroughly rattled. "Is this mimicry a form of aggression?" "Nope," Mason said, biting back a smile. "They're just making fun of you." Hale, perched on a ladder as she tried to net a particularly chatty parrot, added, "If it starts calling you shiny, don't take it personally." The ambassador didn't look reassured. Just as the team began to feel they were gaining control, the predator enclosure's alarms blared again. Mason glanced at the display, his stomach sinking. "Tell me it's not the tiger," Hale said. "It's not the tiger," Mason replied grimly. "It's worse." The holographic display showed the outline of a previously dormant alien predator, a zeerlak, brought in as a complementary exhibit to Earth's apex species. The creature had escaped containment and was now prowling dangerously close to the aviary. "Why would you keep an apex predator from another planet next to Earth's wildlife?" Mason demanded, spinning toward Yilrix. "It was intended to demonstrate interspecies coexistence," Yilrix protested. "Guess what? It's about to demonstrate interspecies lunch," Hale snapped, already grabbing a tranquilizer gun. The zeerlak was a nightmare of teeth, scales, and unsettling intelligence. It moved with predatory grace, sniffing the air as it approached the aviary dome. Hale motioned for silence as she and Mason crept closer. "What's the plan?" she whispered. "Distract it, tranquilize it, and pray it doesn't eat us first," Mason replied. Behind them, Yilrix watched nervously. "This is madness." "No," Mason said, locking eyes with the zeerlak. "This is Earth's way." As the zeerlak prowled closer to the aviary, the honey badger, still not entirely contained, reappeared, snarling with all the confidence of a creature that had never lost a fight. "You have got to be kidding me," Mason muttered. The zeerlak paused, seemingly startled by the badger's audacity. It lowered its head, hissing. The badger, undeterred, charged. "What is that creature doing?" Yilrix asked, horrified. "Winning," Hale said with a grin. Mason Reed watched the scene unfolding below with a mix of awe and exasperation. The zeerlak, a creature that could probably tear through steel if it felt like it, had frozen mid-prowl. Its 6 glowing eyes were locked on the honey badger, which was charging toward it like a furry, snarling missile. "I can't believe this," Mason muttered. Taylor Hale leaned casually against a nearby habitat console, the tranquilizer gun balanced on her shoulder. "Oh, I believe it. That badger thinks it's bulletproof. And honestly, the zeerlak is starting to believe it too." Yilrix Vor, standing as far from the action as possible, looked positively panicked. Their translucent frills shimmered with stress as they turned to Mason. "Why is that creature not retreating? Does it not understand the zeerlak is an apex predator?" Mason smirked. "The badger doesn't care what the zeerlak is. All it knows is that something bigger than it exists, and that's unacceptable." On the observation deck's hollow feed, the zeerlak and the honey badger stood frozen in a tense standoff. The zeerlak hissed, its long, segmented tail curling protectively around its body. The honey badger snarled back, lunging a few steps closer to emphasize its point. "I should probably intervene," Hale said, raising the tranquilizer gun. "Not yet," Mason replied, holding up a hand. "Let's see how this plays out." Yilrix's frills flared in outrage. "This is not a strategy. This is chaos." "No," Mason said, his gaze fixed on the badger. "This is nature." To everyone's astonishment, the zeerlak slowly backed away. Its 6 eyes blinked in sequence, and with a final low growl, it turned and slinked back toward its containment field. The honey badger, apparently satisfied with its victory, sniffed the ground once and casually ambled back to the aviary dome. The observation deck fell silent. "It backed down," Yilrix whispered, their voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "The zeerlak retreated." "Of course it did," Hale said, smirking. "It knows a real apex predator when it sees one." Mason crossed his arms, grinning. "Told you. chaos works. With the Zirlac subdued and safely back in its habitat, the team scrambled to repair the damage before the galactic dignitaries could demand refunds on their tour fees. Mason and Yilrix worked side by side to recalibrate the containment fields, while Hale wrangled the honey badger back into its den, this time using a combination of patience and a holographic decoy shaped like a cobra. "I'm not sure if I should be impressed or terrified that this worked," Hale said, as the badger finally settled. "Why not both?" Mason replied. Later, in the break room, the team regrouped over cups of steaming Martian coffee and a few leftover protein bars. Yilrix stood stiffly in the corner, clearly struggling to find the words. "I admit," they began haltingly, "that I underestimated the effectiveness of your methods." Hale raised an eyebrow. "You mean our primitive chaos?" Yilrix's frills rippled in what might have been an alien nod. "Yes, your adaptability is remarkable. I see now that harmony is not always the ideal state." Mason grinned. "We'll take that as a compliment." Word of the honey badger's showdown with the Zirlac spread quickly among the galactic dignitaries. By the end of the week, the zoo's visitor count had tripled and a new exhibit had been installed, a holographic replay of the apex encounter featuring the honey badger's dramatic charge. "It's official," Hale said, standing beside Mason as they watched a group of crystalline tourists marvel at the hologram. "The honey badger is now the most famous Earth creature in the galaxy." Mason smirked. "I'd say it earned it." As the zoo returned to relative normalcy, the Galactic Federation began to re-evaluate its approach to Earth's wildlife. Humans were given full control of the zoo's management, blending their hands-on methods with alien technology. The result was a chaotic but surprisingly effective system that left both humans and aliens impressed. In the end, Mason reflected, the zoo wasn't just about showcasing Earth's biodiversity. It was about showing the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of, thriving in chaos, adapting to the unexpected, and above all, finding solutions that worked, even if they didn't always make sense.